Harrenhal. My name's Simon.
And I'm Mackelly.
Thank you for joining us for episode 168 of our chapter-by-chapter book review of A Song of Ice and Fire by George Martin. Today, we'll be discussing chapter 24 of A Storm of Swords. That's Bran 2. By the way, I feel like I've set off at a real pace here. I mean, like just upbeat and punchy. I mean, I'm not sure I can maintain.
We'll do it as long as we can. You know,
Okay.
By the end of the show, we'll be run down, but
Yeah.
by then it'll be too late. Everyone will have been committed to the show anyway. 168. We're doing a really good job of staying ahead of the pace with our...
It's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. It makes our life a lot easier just to be 1 week ahead.
It does. Anyway, as always, we're going to chat about the chapter and try not to spoil any future plot points for you. And hopefully we're going to provide you some entertainment along the way.
We'll summarise what happened, discuss our thoughts on it, provide some useful background, compare it to the television show, indulge in a little pedantry, and cover some relevant news and listener correspondence. Be sure to check out the show notes. They'll provide some additional information that will be particularly helpful if you're not reading along. How are you, Mackelly?
I am doing well this morning. How about you?
I'm fine, mustn't grumble. The World Cup starts today.
Right.
And so I'm excited, and also... I don't want to get too political, but I'm also feeling very grubby and dirty about the fact that this is... And the thing is, it's not Qatar. I mean, a lot of people seem to have a sort of bee in their bonnet about Qatar. Qatar is an Arab nation, and I mean, I don't agree with all of their laws, but they're entitled to them. It's FIFA. FIFA is the world's most corrupt body.
Yeah.
There's nothing in the world more corrupt than FIFA. They are revolting on every level.
I just heard on the radio someone say, what is more corrupt? It was something, whatever they were talking about, the IOC or FIFA. Or the...
FIFA could teach the IOC, I think. I mean, the IOC line their pockets. But of the people who awarded the World Cup to Qatar, there were 22 people who voted. I think 16 have either been disbarred from being involved in any sport ever again, or are currently being extradited to face trial.
Oh, goodness.
16 of the 22.
Okay.
And the other 6, I don't know. They must be bribing someone with their ill-gotten gains. It's so wrong.
Yeah, sure sounds it.
You have a story for us, I believe.
I don't. This must be an old note, because I don't have an Ethan. I thought maybe you had a story about Ethan. And
No, you're wrong. You do have a story. At the end of the last episode, you said, I had an Ethan story I was going to tell.
Oh.
And I said, well, I'll put it in the notes for the next time.
Put it in the notes for next time.
What's wrong with your memory, Mackelly?
He's home. He came home to watch Molly's play, which was nice of him. He even laughed. He laughed at several. It was a comedy. He laughed out loud at several of the jokes. So I was.
He's not the jaded millennial that I picture him as.
He took the playbill and he said, "I'm going to bring this home with me, like home to his apartment. Not just home to our house and then throw it away." So I was impressed at.
What a good kid.
How seriously took it. I will say, I think the whole family is glad. Last night was there was 2 shows yesterday, and so the night show was the last show of the production, and I think everybody was ready for that, especially Molly and the other cast members.
So how many times did you go?
Oh my goodness. So we went to what's called the Wundle Probe. I think it's how it's pronounced. I'm not sure. It begins with a W. Wundle Probe. It's like that was like dress rehearsal, but with an audience. It's like their final run through before the play starts.
Point of order: does that word whatever that word you're saying, does it have the word both wand and probe in it?
I think it does.
Okay.
If I'm pronouncing it right.
Just checking.
So we went to the to Wednesday show. That was the Wandle Probe. We went to the Thursday opening night show, and then Ethan, a friend of mine, and I went to Friday's show, and then Stacy, her mom, her aunt, and her cousin went to the Saturday morning show, and then we all just gave up. She was on her own on Saturday evening. So
I bet you weren't laughing along with Ethan by the time.
Well,
or were you nudging him? Wait for this one.
Right. Well, the advantage is, it's a live show, so you can't rewind it. You can't put on closed captions. And it's a comedy, so some things are said pretty quick or said off the cuff, like, or said kind of in a snide manner and stuff. And so by the third time, I could have basically done a podcast explaining what all of the
or listened to a podcast.
I could have explained, like, this character, what they're referring to there is that. And, I basically could have recited all of the lines.
Tell her congratulations. It's awesome that she was doing it.
Will do. I will pass that along. But yes, now we've turned our attentions entirely to the holiday season. The inside of the house looks like Christmas blew up in here. And I'll say, so my in-laws come tomorrow. And Stacy wanted the house to be inside, at least, completely decorated for Christmas. And so we drug the trees down out of the attic. There's one that sits in the living room and one that sits in a little landing above the foyer. And I plugged what's supposed to be our pre-lit tree in the living room. And there was about 6 lights that came on. So I was like, okay, I've got 2 options here. Either I can run a whole bunch of strands of light around this tree. It's no longer a pre-lit tree. Or we can go out and buy a new pre-lit tree. And I had a gift card. So I was like, let's just take this gift card and go, subsidize a new tree with the card. So we go to a warehouse store near our house called BJ's. I'm not sure how widely familiar people are with the store BJ's. But anyway, it's like a Sam's Club or a Costco. And we're looking at this tree, which is 2 feet taller than our previous tree. We're going from a 7-foot tree to a 9-foot tree because we have 9-foot ceilings in our first floor. And I'm like, well, it'll fit, but there's no more angel at the top. This is like, it's going to cut off. Right? She's cutting off. It's cutting off at the ceiling. And we're like, oh, it's pre-lit, 1,000 bulbs. It looks really nice. Let's get it. So we get it. We bring it home. I set it up. It is enormous. I forgot to calculate how wide the tree is at 9 feet. So Ethan comes in, he gets home right as we're finishing setting it up, and he's like, looks like Clark Griswold's tree from a Christmas Vacation. It bursts through the windows.
For the listeners, I have 2 points of order to what you just said. Your monologue was entertaining. It looks like Christmas exploded in here. It is ironic that Mackelly speaks to me from a completely featureless blank background. It's like, yeah, not really. And the second one is your past tense of drag was very interesting. I think for our foreign language listeners, probably they should say dragged rather than drug.
Oh, did I say drug?
Drug the tree.
We drug the tree.
I'm not sure. The poor tree. What did you do with it once it was drugged?
Apparently it was too drugged to light up when I plugged it in. But now we're off to, we're going to a lake house with 10 people, my in-laws and my family and me. And so we're paying a rather significant amount of money to spend the week at this house, which is...
Thanksgiving week, yeah.
Yes. Which is half the size of my house and less than half the bathrooms. So, like, what could possibly go wrong here?
That'll be pretty, but I'm not sure you're gonna want to get in the water.
No, I don't quite understand. As you could probably pick up by my tone, I don't quite understand the point of this excursion to the lake over an hour away from our house.
I mean, lakes are pretty, but
right.
I think you've got to go in. I mean, you've gone all that way. You got to jump in.
Yes. Polar plunge it.
Polar plunge.
We're gonna have a family polar plunge.
Well, the thing to do is hold hands and then throw them all in. Oh, not me. All right. Well, let's get down to business. How did we leave Bran Stark? Well, he was heading north in the company of the Reed siblings, Meera and Jojen, his direwolf Summer, and Hodor, of course. Jojen was trying to get Bran to influence Summer's behaviour while he was warging, but Bran just seems to like being the wolf. Bran was being warned by the Reeds not to overstay in his wolf dreams. They feared that he might not return. And Jojen wants to head north so that the three-eyed raven can teach Bran more. Jojen is at the end of his skills. All right, Mackelly, why don't we give the summary of this one?
Okay.
By the way, this is a cracking chapter. Typically, when we go to Bran, I'm like, poor crippled boy trudging north with Hodor. It's like, it's not going to be very entertaining. But this was a rip-roarer.
Yes, quite. So Bran, Hodor, Meera, Jojen, and Summer are all headed north. They're staying west of the Kingsroad to avoid encounters, as they're certainly a memorable party. The going is tough. The Flint Hills are not tall, but punctuated with streams and tricky climbs. They get lost sporadically, navigating by the Ice Dragon constellation, his blue eye being true north.
Meera is used to the flatlands of the Neck and complains about the up and downness of the land here, whilst finding it very beautiful. The weather's getting more and more wintry with flurries of sleet. Meera is keeping them fed by fishing the streams, and Summer occasionally chips in with a mammalian catch, but they're having some days with empty bellies.
Uh-oh. They see almost nobody, but as Summer, Bran has noticed the mountain folk watching their progress. Bran lists the families that live in these hills: Walls, Flints, Harclays, Knots, Littles, and Norrays. His father's maternal grandmother was a Flint. Meera recalls that her father knew a Theo Wall during the war.
Their only encounter with anyone is when forced by a freezing rain into a cave. They find a man already in there with a fire and food. He shares his food, and Bran thinks by a pinecone clasp that he's a Little. He tells them that they still have a ways to go before the wall. He talks of the dangers on the Kingsroad and how times have changed since the Starks lost Winterfell. There are squid in the Wolfswood, and the flayed men harass travellers along the Kingsroad, offering rewards for wolfskins and news of the walking dead.
I think that show ended recently, so... The Little worries about the wall. He's heard of the great ranging, and only the ravens returning with few words. Jojen reassures the man that the Starks will return to Winterfell. The next morning, their new companion is gone, but he's left them some food. They see an eagle that day, and Bran tries to reach out to it, but fails. He explains to the Reeds that Hodor's real name is Walder. Old Nan was his great-great-grandmother. He worries that she was killed by Theon's men in the sack of Winterfell, but never saw her body. Meera points out that it wasn't the Ironborn doing the killing. They were among the dead.
Meera entertains with a story, and it is a doozy. Jojen asks 3 times whether Bran ever heard the story from Ned. He hadn't. The story is about a Crannogman who learns all the lore of his people but yearns for more. He decides to visit the Isle of Faces to find the Green Men. He met and stayed with them for a winter, and in the year of the false spring he left and stumbled upon the Great Tourney of Harrenhal, where he had quite the adventure. We'll postpone that for the discussion. The chapter then concludes with Bran wondering if the Green Men could help him, maybe to walk again.
I agree. It was a fun chapter. It was quite a departure from your average chapter in this story. It took some thinking to figure out how to set up an episode around this chapter, because it basically revolved around a story that Meera was telling Bran.
Right. And she tells it cryptically. She does not include any names in the story.
Right.
So you have to be paying attention or have a memory to really understand her story. But fortunately, it is transparent enough that, it's not a spoiler to reveal. So I think when we retell it, we're just going to use names, right?
Right.
But understand, as Meera tells it to Bran, she does not use any names. It's
not a single name.
Yeah.
No.
So for Bran, it's all very cryptic. It's just it could be ancient history for Bran. Although she does say it was the year of the false spring, and he might know when that was. It was before he was born, but it was fairly recent. It was at the end of the last winter, in fact.
Right. And it's unclear as the chapter ends whether Bran has any clue that this story is about his family or not.
Yeah, I mean, I assume he associates the mention of wolves with Starks.
Right. He asks 2 legs or 4, and she says 2. So
right. So he knows those are Starks. But again, it could be ancient history. He doesn't know that this is actually just 12 years ago that this was happening.
Yeah, and unless he does know when the fall spring was,
Right.
But also he critiques the story afterward. He says like, "Well, it was a good story, but you should have changed these." So possibly he just thinks it was a fun made up tale.
Yeah. I mean, he's a little kid. You know,
Right.
He has a story and takes it on face value as a story. But probably... And he knows that the Starks were in the story, but he just has no idea which Starks.
Right. Maybe that's why Meera changes the names to protect the...
Right. But then again, it's... But I mean, what's the protection? I mean, there is
Right.
just one bit. There's just one bit which kind of feels like it needs protection, which I'm going to mention in pedantry.
Okay.
Let me tell you. We're waiting for that moment.
So the chapter opens with them traipsing through the mountains in the north, and Bran, his mind wanders to Rickon and Osha, and he wonders, where are they now? He envisions them being either in White Harbor with the Manderleys, eating a nice seafood meal, or being at Last Hearth with the Umbers, sitting by a fire, eating a nice meal, because he's hungry and cold.
Yeah. So when they left, was there a sense of where they were going? I mean, I thought they were heading to the Manderleys at White Harbor. I thought that was her plan, but maybe I just projected that. Yeah,
so it was very vague. So Lewin told Osha, keep the princes separate. So that's why they went in their separate directions. But there was no direction given at all. Osha said she was going to take the East Gate and travel the Kingsroad, but didn't say north or south.
North or south, I see. And that then could lead you, yeah.
And then this group said they were going to take the Hunter's Gate and head. Did he say head north? I can't even remember if or if they were just going to go out the Hunter's Gate.
That's the way they went.
Right, yeah. But, Osha might figure, if that wasn't specifically mentioned, Osha might figure they were headed for Greywater Watch, because that's probably the safest place north of the Neck. Of course, they would very much chance running into Ironborn if they went south.
Yes. I do think that... I mean, I understand the reason for safety for this group, because this group is so much more memorable. Osha and Rickon could pass as mother and son,
Yes.
And no one would bat an eyelid. But this group, I mean, you could carry a neon sign saying, I am Bran Stark and I'm not dead.
Right, yeah.
It would not be more obvious.
Right. And so the little man, I keep calling him the little man because he's a little, but he may be a large man. I don't know. His last name is Little, and we never got his first name. Yeah. He mentions when they meet him in the cave that the Kingsroad is basically crawling with Boltons, looking for Starks or Stark bannermen, or, as he puts it, Walking Dead, when he looks at Bran and his direwolf. So
yes.
It's smart of Jojen, who refuses to let them consider the Kingsroad, to not do so, because, like you said, they stand out in a crowd. I mean, they've got an 8-foot tall giant, a boy on his back with no use of his legs, and a huge direwolf. So they couldn't look more Stark if they tried.
And Meera carrying her little 3-pronged thing. Right. That's the final clincher.
That's the straw that breaks the camel's back there. Right here at the beginning of the chapter, we get some near references to the title of the series. Bran mentions Osha's talking about how she hates these mountains, and he said, well, yesterday you said that you love the mountains, and she said, oh, I do, more than anything. And he said, well, you can't, they're different. And she said, why can't I do both? And he says, you can't love something and hate something, just like you can't have night and day or ice and fire. And Jojen says, if ice can burn, then love and hate can mate. And, so they're tossing around this ice and fire stuff, and you just wonder, are they just tossing it in there for effect, or is there a reason that it's brought up in this chapter, where the chapter heavily focuses on the tourney at Harrenhal, where we've got Rhaegar, who we know, thanks to Dany's dream, has this premonition of a song of ice and fire.
Yeah.
And it kicks off this story. The tourney at Harrenhal feels kind of like...
Yes, it's the moment where the events that led to the Game of Thrones occurred.
Right, yes. Everything comes together at that tourney, and when it bursts apart, our story begins. So you just wonder if it was thrown in, this ice and fire stuff was thrown in intentionally in this chapter.
Yeah. The Little is kind of a good character, although he never gets named and he's only in it very briefly. He's extremely well informed.
He is.
Clearly knows exactly who Bran is.
Yes.
And is very kind and supportive to them and gives them, not reassuring words, but he talks about the good old days when the Starks were in charge and how things have gone not so well since. And it's interesting then that Jojen sort of reassures him that the Starks will get back to Winterfell, and the guy doesn't take that on face value like you might. It might, this might be someone just telling you something to make you feel better.
Right.
He asks, "Why do you think that?" And he said, "Well, I had a dream." And he said, "Well, I've had dreams and they've not come true."
Right.
And Jojen is like, "Well, there are dreams and there are dreams."
Yeah.
And
yeah.
So
yeah.
I wonder if the Little would take that as kind of like nice prophecy, or if he's just like, that teenager was a bit of a know-it-all.
Yeah. That could go either way there. It's hard to tell. We also get a reference to Bran mentions that, speaking of the Little Man and the other northern mountain clans, Bran mentions that his great-grandmother was a Flint, which is another northern mountain clan. And so his great-grandmother, Ned's grandmother, was also an Arya Stark. And she was the...
she was an Arya Flint, presumably.
Yes, Arya Flint, then became Arya Stark. She was a mother to Ned's mom, Lyara, and then Lyara also had an older sister named Branda, because they always got to fit that Brandon in there if you're a Stark.
Yeah.
Since she only had 2 daughters, one of them had to be a Branda instead. But then we mentioned in the summary, there's a mention there. It comes up about the Walls, who is another northern mountain clan, and Meera says, "Jojen, didn't Father say he rode with a Wall?" And Jojen says, "Yeah, it was Theo Wall. They called him Buckets because their sigil has buckets on it." And if that name sounds slightly familiar, it's because we've heard it once before. He was part of the group that rode with Ned to free Lyanna from Rhaegar at the Tower of Joy.
Okay.
He was in Ned's dream that Ned had about that event when he was unconscious after he broke his leg. So,
as was Meera and Jojen's father, Howland,
yes,
right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah, speaking of what you were saying about the Little Man, talking about good times gone by, he was talking about how, when the Starks were in Winterfell, it was safe and people were fed, and it was a better time. And it makes it pretty clear that much of the North still supports and longs for Stark leadership. Yeah,
I mean, you don't know if let's say the Boltons are going to try and take over the North, maybe they'll impose, a law and order, and things will go back to peace under them too. But right now, the place is in chaos, and so that would certainly make you long for the prior authority to come back.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I definitely think there's loyalty to the Starks here, but I'm not sure that loyalty would last necessarily if things go back to normal.
I guess so. 8,000 years is a long time to...
True.
And the North is nothing if not tradition,
It's a good point, yeah. So the Little feeds them, and then the next morning he disappears, and he moves on, but he leaves them oatcakes and sausages. And Bran is very grateful for this because they were hungry, and he wants to pay him back 100-fold for every nut and berry that he was given. And this is a sign, I think, that Bran is sort of growing into sort of the leadership thing. I mean, that's what you should do. You should thank people for their efforts, especially when they're being selfless like this guy is being.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, we've mentioned before that Bran has some pretty good leadership instincts for one so young. And, the North, like we were just saying, the North has supported the Starks for 8,000 years because the Starks support the North. They do the things that leaders are supposed to do, unlike, say, Joff or Cersei. Bran realizes you keep your people loyal and happy by doing the things that lords and kings are supposed to do, which is take care and protect their subjects. You leave me some oat cakes to help me get through a tough time. I'm going to repay you for that. And I will at the same time keep order and peace in the region.
So the little mentioned that there were squids in the Wolfswood. That's clearly Asher Greyjoy and her company, who are based at Deepwood Motte still. And there are flayed men riding the Kingsroad asking about paying silver for the wolfskins and gold for information about the Walking Dead. So that presumably is Bran that they're looking for.
Right.
And we had a debate before this started about the wisdom of this.
Right.
You were saying Ramsay Bolten is trying to kind of giving the game away by asking about this dead kid who's supposedly dead. Why would you be asking about him?
Yes, right. Yeah. It's a tough juxtaposition to be like, I'll give you money for any Starks or any Stark bannerman that you kill. At the same time, have you possibly seen Bran Stark by any chance? I want to take care of him. I feel like maybe Theon didn't actually kill him. I want to follow up on that. It's just it's a tough one to do both.
But what I came back with was he only heard from Theon that Theon had killed Bran Stark. And you don't trust anything that comes out of Theon's mouth, is what I would say if I was Ramsay and questioned about this.
Right. Would you explain why, though? Would you, or just... Because he's paying silver for what they call wolfskins, so which sounds like dead Stark bannermen to me.
Right, yep, I agree.
Or loyalists, I guess I should say. They're all theoretically Stark bannermen. But then he's also giving gold for info on Bran. So how do you spin asking for info on Bran?
You mean because you're killing Stark bannermen, are you implicitly saying I'm going to kill Bran if he's not already dead?
Yes, right.
Well, gold is gold.
Right. I'm loyal and all, but I'm also broke.
Yeah. That is an interesting question.
We'll be right back.
Hello, friends. Are you ready to make some unforgettable memories? Well, if so, consider the Marriott Bonvoy program. Discover the perfect destination for your summer getaway and unlock exclusive deals on luxurious accommodations. With our affiliate partnership, you'll enjoy unbeatable savings and a seamless booking experience. Don't let summer slip away. Visit Marriott Bonvoy today and make this vacation season one for the books. Use our Ghosts of Harrenhal affiliate page to check it all out and buy Bonvoy points or give some as a gift. The link to our page is in the show notes. But then the third bit of info that we get is he mentions, the little man mentions he wouldn't go to Castle Black because he knows that the old bear, Jeor Mormont, took the watch into the haunted woods, and all that came back was ravens with hardly a message. And so it seems Sam's ravens did make it back from the Fist of the First Men.
Unencumbered by paper.
Yes, he did get like one or so messages off saying we're under attack, but he didn't get off the ones that said we're under attack by whites. Yeah. So, that was a very important bit of information that didn't get mentioned. And the little man says, dark wings, dark words. That's a known saying throughout the Seven Kingdoms. But then he adds, but when birds fly silent, seems to me even darker. And, I thought about that, and I thought, I wonder if the lack of messages, the plethora of birds, but lack of messages, possibly could tip Bowen Marsh, who's basically the Castellan of Castle Black at the moment, and Maester Aemon, could it give them enough clue to prepare them for something bad? Be on the lookout. Something happened.
I take your point, but just an alternative theory here. Sam knocked over the bird cages. They fell open and the birds flew away. And entirely plausible reason that the birds flew home without messages, you know.
That's
Would you change your policies at the wall just because the birds came home? I don't know.
that is yeah, that's true. That's very possible. We are dealing with Sam. He's a bit clumsy at times.
Clumsy, that's what I'm thinking, yeah. Okay, so after all this manoeuvring, we get to the sort of the heart of the chapter, which is Meera's story. Bran asks for a story, and Meera comes up with one. And as I mentioned, Jojen keeps asking Bran if he's heard this story before. He feels sure his father would have told him this story.
Multiple times. Even throughout the story, he says, are you sure?
Interrupts the story to ask, yeah. It seems weird to me, but anyway. So it begins with Meera sort of like giving a little bit of background about Greywater Watch and the Neck. And basically, she says there aren't any knights there, but apart from under the water, you know, because basically it is a huge bog, and if you go there in your armor, you're going to sink and drown, and many have done that before.
Yep.
She describes them as Freys and other fools. So there's definitely animosity here. I mean, they are virtual neighbours. I mean, the Reeds, Greywater Watch is and the Neck generally is the lowest, is the southernmost point of the north, and the Freys and the Twins is the sort of like most northerly family of the Riverlands. So they are somewhat neighbours.
Yeah. It certainly explains why the Walders were so cruel and derogatory toward the Reeds when they showed up in Winterfell. The Walders in Winterfell, there's Walders everywhere, but the two in Winterfell.
Yeah.
And there's a few other instances, like she mentions when she's talking about the Freys and other fools, she mentions all those who tried to conquer Greywater Watch, which makes it sound like maybe the Freys had tried to annex, bring in the Neck into their domain, and it did not go well.
Yeah, clearly bad blood between those two families.
Yes.
And then she also sort of giving the background to her story, she also gives the Crannog men some kind of magical qualities. She says that they can change earth to water and water to earth with no more than a whispered word. They can talk to trees. They can weave words and make castles appear and disappear. Now, obviously, some of that is this whole thing of Greywater Watch not being easy to find.
Right. Theoretically, it's said to move around. The castle moves, but it could just be the bogs shift,
The bogs shift. The castle is in a fixed place. The bogs shift, and only the locals can read.
Right.
Changing patterns.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that's what all that is about is, change earth to water and water to earth. That's the bog shifting and moving, weaving words and making the castle appear and disappear is really just the castle seemingly moving because the bogs are shifting. Or we haven't been to Greywater Watch yet. Maybe it actually is on some sort of floating situation there.
So we mentioned that this Cranogman went to the Isle of Faces and spent the winter there, and then in the year of the false spring, he left and stumbled upon the Great Tourney at Harrenhal. Now, the Cranogmen are small, and he was accosted and mocked by 3 squires. They knocked him to the ground, but he was rescued by
a she-wolf.
We're just going to use names. He was rescued by Lyanna Stark. That's who rescued him. Ned's sister. So then, after this, he hangs around with the Starks for the remainder of the tournament and befriends them basically.
At the assistance of Lyanna, she kind of strong arms him into doing so.
So various events happen at the tournament, and Meera provides them. But again, she doesn't use any names. But Jaime Lannister was named to the Kingsguard. His father was absent because he'd fallen out with King Aerys at the time. During the feast, various things happened. Brandon Stark asked Ashara Dane, who you've heard of before, and we'll come back to why, to dance with his shy younger brother, Ned Stark. And they did. They danced together, and, well, that's it. Nothing more to say. And then the youngest Stark, who's Benjen, who we know as First Ranger of the Night's Watch, offered the Crannog man, who, that's the one I really don't know if we should name, but I guess we should at this point.
I think it's okay. I mean,
he's the one. Yeah, I mean, yeah, we should name it. It's Meera and Jojen's father. It's Howland Reed.
Right.
He's the Crannog man who...
Yes.
They're telling the story of how their father met Bran's father, basically.
Right. Which is why Jojen can't believe that this story...
Right. But there are elements of this story you wouldn't tell your son.
Right. I agree. We could get into that when you finish recapping.
So Benjen offers Howland armor so he could take his vengeance on these 3 squires that bullied him. But Howland is sort of peaceful and doesn't want this. He turns him down. But he does pray to the old gods for some kind of restitution. And the next day, he gets it. A mystery knight turns up and joins the jousting.
The Knight of the Laughing Tree.
Known as the Knight of the Laughing Tree, because his sigil was a weirwood with a laughing face, right?
Right.
The Knight of the Laughing Tree defeated the 3 knights whose squires bullied Howland Reed. When you beat them, you're allowed to ransom something. Take their armor.
Their armor, yeah. Their stuff. You get their stuff.
Instead of that, the mystery knight asked the 3 knights to teach their squires some honor. That was the ransom. And so Howland got his revenge through the person of this mystery knight. The next day, King Aerys was in attendance, and he did not like this mystery knight and wanted him exposed. But the mystery knight went missing and never turned up the next day, so he was a brief visitor to this. Ultimately, the tournament was won by Rhaegar Targaryen, and then she says what happens next is a sadder tale that she won't say here. So that's basically the story as she tells it, but there's a lot there.
She did add that Bran says after the story that the she-wolf, Lyanna, should have been named the Queen of Love and Beauty, and Meera says she was, and that is a sadder tale.
That's the sadder tale, yeah.
Yeah. There's a few specific details in there, like, so the tournament was held in the honor of the Lord of Harrenhal's daughter, the Lord of Harrenhal being Walter Went at the time. And it's mentioned that the maid whose tournament this is in the tournament is in honor of has a famous uncle that's a White Knight of the Kingsguard. That is Oswell Went.
Oswell, yeah.
And he was actually one of the ones that was at the Tower of Joy with guarding Lyanna when Ned and Howland and Theo and the rest showed up.
Right.
I will say the daughter for whom the tourney was in honor of, no name. I could find no name for her. And it's mentioned she has 4 brothers. Also, no name given for those brothers. But
I like to think that she was called Caymond. Caymond Went.
I see what you did there. It's one other detail is that the Knight of Skulls and Kisses was outdrank by Robert Baratheon in what she refers to as War of Wine Cups. And that Knight of Skulls and Kisses is Richard Lonmouth. He's obviously from House Lonmouth, which is a Stormland house. So he's called that because the sigil is literally skulls and red lips.
Okay.
So, and being a Stormland house, he and Robert probably had a lot of drinking duels.
Right. So the story provides quite a bit of colour to some of the characters that we've known. For instance, Ned. Ned seems to be painfully shy. Couldn't ask Ashara to dance, even though he wanted to, and Brandon did it for him. That's kind of... It's not really surprising to discover this, but Ned's sort of taciturn insularity had always come across as just being his northern gruffness, but maybe he was quite shy on top of that.
Sure, yeah. It might have been why early on, I think it was early in a Game of Thrones, he was thinking about how he was never supposed to be the Lord of Winterfell. It was Brandon was the one who was suited for the role, the one who was meant to have it, and now when he died, it fell to Ned. Could be partially because of that.
We'll be right back.
This episode is sponsored by Audible. To get a free audiobook, or 2 if you're an Amazon Prime member, go to our exclusive URL, audibletrial.com/ghostsharrenhal. You can find the link in our show notes.
But that's the thing, you see, there's a sort of cause and effect here, because you think of Ned's character as embodying the North, but in actual fact, he was different from Brandon. Brandon was quite outgoing and gregarious.
So it seems,
and,
right?
And if our books had opened with Brandon Stark as head of Lord of Winterfell, we might have got a very different impression of what Northerners were like.
Yeah.
They might have been, fun-loving, smiley people.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
And I think Lyanna's another one that I see in a slightly different light. Previously, we've seen her as something of a sort of meek victim of circumstance. She was sitting in the crowd at the tournament, and then the roses were dropped in her lap. She's like, "It's not my fault I'm cute," So when I thought of her in those terms, I thought of her kind of like Sansa. But this story gives her a lot more aria. I mean, first of all, she physically protected Howland Reed from these three squires, which is brave for anyone, especially a slip of a girl.
Right.
And then she also throws wine over Benjen, her brother, when he mocks her tears when she cries when Rhaegar Targaryen sings. And there's an interesting point.
Uh-huh.
Because
yeah.
Rhaegar Targaryen, the man who gave her the flowers as Queen of Love and Beauty, made her cry the night before. So suddenly she's not just someone who's like, who's this guy giving me these flowers? This is a young lady who's like, oh, that guy with the voice is just giving me the flowers. So does this throw up the spectre of something very important? Today, everything we've heard about Rhaegar and Lyanna's relationship is through the lens of Robert Baratheon.
Right. Important detail. Yes, that's an important detail.
Yeah. It's painted everything as very one-sided. That Rhaegar crowned her the love of Queen and Beauty, but she had nothing to do with it. And now we're getting the feeling that she felt something for him. Maybe she was not shocked in the least to be crowned as Queen of Love and Beauty. Maybe she was kind of expecting it. Did she speak to him the night before after saying, "Oh, your singing voice just drove me to tears,"
Yes, yeah, all very plausible.
Then this casts a shadow over the whole abduction. She was abducted by Rhaegar, raped mercilessly. Was she? Was she a completely unwilling victim here?
Yeah, it's a very good question. This story does change things a bit. I don't know. I don't know necessarily changes things. It provides a different perspective.
Exactly. And a perspective that nobody in the right mind would have voiced while Robert Baratheon was alive.
True.
Right? And that's the key point. Now that Robert is dead, are we going to hear more about this? Like, did she flirt with him? Was she, And then that whole thing becomes, a lot more grey area. I will say, I mean, obviously, what really triggered the rebellion was what happened to Brandon and Rickard Stark.
Right.
But for Robert, the real reason for the rebellion was Lyanna's kidnap. Maybe Ned knew. Maybe Ned was like, I don't think she was kidnapped. I think she went willingly,
That's possible.
But, of course, then his father and brother were murdered, so he was like, all right, I'm in on this anyway.
He was all in, yes, right, at that point. Yes, that's all really useful observations. That's stuff that needed to be brought up about this story. That's really good details that you are providing there.
So, and the other big plot hinge that gets revealed here by Meera is the connection between Ned and Ashara Dane. We've talked about this being the possible the mother for Jon Snow,
right?
And we didn't really have an awful lot to go on. Her name was mentioned by Cat, I think, in a Catelyn chapter.
It's been rumored around Winterfell, I believe, is where she got that.
Right, but I think we read that in a Catelyn chapter that it had been rumored around Winterfell. Well, now we found the source of this rumor because Ned did like her, was too shy to ask her to dance. Brandon did it for him. They danced. Dancing doesn't lead to babies.
True. That's true.
But there is a connection between the two of them that predates his connection with Catelyn.
Yes. And it's unclear whether how much he fancied Ashara. I think, did the chapter say he wanted to but couldn't ask her? And so...
that's the impression I got. I'm not sure if it said those words. I mean, if your big brother asks a girl to dance for you, probably you've had a word with him, I'm guessing.
Or when you deal with big brothers, it could have also just been to watch him squirm.
True, but then you might have chosen not the prettiest lady at the dance.
Yes, that's possible as well. Sure.
Yeah. So there you go. That's the connection now is established between Ned and Ashara.
Yes, that it is.
So who were the knights who bullied Howland?
The squires. Yeah. So the knights that the squires squired for, the Pitchfork Knight was a knight of House Hague of the Riverlands. I don't know which specific knight it was. The Porcupine Squire, his knight was from House Blunt of the Crownlands. And of course, we've met Boris Blunt. So we get the whole bullying thing from that family. And the other was a Frey. I don't know which Frey, though.
Could Boris have been the squire?
Oh.
Age-wise, probably not far off.
That's possible.
Or the knight himself, actually.
Yeah. Could have been. Yeah. Could have been the knight, could have been the squire. A brother of the Night's Watch spoke and asked knights to consider joining the Night's Watch. We've mentioned ages ago this as a possible connection to how and why Benjen ended up in the Night's Watch, because there's and we probably mentioned it at the time, but that's fine. The youngest son, like we saw Sir Waymar Royce, he was the third son of Jon Royce, end up at the Night's Watch. That's where the Game of Thrones prologue began with. It's fine for most families for the third son to end up in a place where, like the Royal Kingsguard, like Sir Loras, or the Night's Watch. But maybe not if you're the Starks. Because, after Brandon's death, it left Ned to carry on an 8,000-year-old line all by himself. You think you need some support there, like a backup plan.
Well, I mean, Ned's relationship with Ashara provided him the backup.
Because what if he and Kat had only had daughters? Then they would have had to. I don't know how progressive the Stark family is with. Okay, well then, Sansa is going to be the heir. Or are they going to have to drag Benjen out of the Night's Watch? So it just, I just wanted to mention that because we had discussed before that's possibly where Benjen got the idea to join the Night's Watch. Because otherwise, what is the point of that line in this story?
Right, yeah. So the story, I mean, ostensibly she's telling the story of her father's sort of like, being unusual for a Crannog man in that they went out into the wide world and saw some things. And there's quite a lot of parallels between what Howland Reed did and what Bran is trying to do. He'd learned what he could learn at home and now was going to see the ancient magical people to find out more.
Right. Yeah, and so at the very end of the chapter, when Bran is thinking about, boy, he would like to run into the Green Men at the Isle of Faces. Maybe they could help him walk again, even just for a day, like how he keeps thinking that it's the Crannog man that is the Knight of the Laughing Tree. And he thinks, so they made the Green Men made him a knight for a day. Well, if they could make me walk for a day, that would be enough. And maybe he's hoping that, the Green Men get their roots likely from the old gods and the children of the forest. That they watch over the weirwood trees and in the Isle of Faces. Maybe he's thinking the three-eyed crow has similar capabilities.
Yeah. So that leads to, well, Bran assumes that it is Howland Reed who's been, blessed by the Green Men to become a knight for a day and get his revenge. But that's not necessarily true. There are some other candidates for who this might be. My first reading of it, I actually thought it was a green man. A green man had come and taken his cause up for him. But then I heard you suggest a story which I like very much.
Well, as far as the Green Man goes, Bran considered that option as well, but he was under the impression that Green Men had antlers for hair, and helm wouldn't fit over. I mean, branches, like tree branches for hair, and the helmet wouldn't fit over very well. Well, the one you're referring to that I mentioned is many in A Song of Ice and Fire fandom think that the Knight of the Laughing Tree is none other than Lyanna Stark herself, and it fits on some levels. She did defend Howland against the three squires, and of those, the knights that were defeated by the Knight of the Laughing Tree. And she kept insisting, like I said, that Howland, be with the Starks as an honored bannerman. And, she was very much into defending the North's honor and reputation. So, and also, we know that she had some capability. And Harwin told Arya when she tried to escape, when she rode off and Harwin had to track her down, that she was good. She rode like her aunt Lyanna did, but of course he was better. And we've also heard that Lyanna, I think Ned mentioned this to Arya, that his sister Lyanna bucked convention and was kind of wild, much like Arya was. He was relating Arya to her aunt, and the description, the physical description, fits a bit. The knight was described as short of stature, having ill-fitting armor. So there's some connections there, but there's one issue that will be hard to fit, is that after the Knight of the Laughing Tree defeats the three other knights, the knight spoke with a booming voice. And I've never heard Lyanna's voice described in general, but you'd think if she had a booming voice, it might have been...
That would be the hardest part to fake. I think.
Yes. So maybe speaking through a helmet makes your voice naturally more booming. I don't know.
Yep. So, one mystery not uncovered yet. So, this all goes to sort of like some points that we've talked about throughout the books about sort of the knights frequently don't live up to their vows,
Right.
Most of the knights here are not great characters, although, when defeated, they agreed to do what they should have done, but hey, they weren't raising their squires to be honourable in the first place.
Right.
The one true knight here is the one who isn't a knight, the Knight of the Laughing Tree. So
yes, yeah. It felt like a story straight out of the heart of the Hound.
Yeah.
Because, even Meera mentions that sometimes the knights are the monsters, because Bran wants to hear a story about knights fighting monsters, and she says, sometimes the knights are the monsters. So, yeah, it fits very well with the philosophy of the Hound, and very much goes against the concepts that Brienne of Tarth lives by, except for the Knight of the Laughing Tree, who...
Right. And in many ways, if Brienne of Tarth was hearing this story, she would totally associate herself with the Knight of the Laughing Tree. Not a true knight, can't be knighted, but
right,
truly honourable and embodying the virtues of a knight.
Exactly.
And again, just before we finish on the discussion, I will say again that Jojen Reed was absolutely convinced that Ned Stark must have told his 8-year-old son this story 100 times, he says. It's just a strange story to tell. I mean, there are definitely some elements of it you would tell your children about. How did the rebellion come to be, Dad?
Right.
Well, let me tell you. But before I met your mum, I danced with this hottie from Dawn, and and that's where John came from. That's not the kind of bedtime story you're going to tell a 7-year-old.
Yes, I had the same thought. First of all, Ned doesn't seem like the type to sit down with the kids around him and for story time, complete with voices and acting out the scenes,
Although he could perhaps do the booming voice.
Yes, right. And Bran mentions that it was old Nan that told the stories around Winterfell, and
she presumably was not in attendance at the tourney of Harrenhal.
Right. Yeah, that does seem unlikely. But there's also both sides, the Howland Reed side and the Ned Stark side, have very different perspectives on the events. For Howland, you could see it as an interesting story that shaped his loyalty to the Starks, sent him on grand adventure, and surely changed his life in many ways. One seeming to be, I believe I'm right, that he's not left Greywater Watch since he got back from Robert's Rebellion. So, maybe he did his time out there and was like, wow, that was intense. I'm never leaving the bogs again. But for Ned, this story is something entirely different. It's much darker. It's the beginning of the end for much of his family. It led to his sister's kidnapping by Rhaegar and his father and brother's deaths at the hands of King Aerys, and a war that he was a major part of. And like you mentioned, plus possibly, this is the catalyst that led to him dishonoring himself and Cat by fathering Jon, if you believe that Ashara Dane could be the mother.
And again, the possibly controversial part about Lyanna here, that she actually was a willing participant in her kidnapping with Rhaegar.
Oh, true.
Last time Ned saw Bran, Robert Baratheon was alive and well and present. You would not be sharing that story with a 7-year-old.
Yeah.
He bounces on Robert's knee and says, "Hey, I heard that Lyanna really liked Rhaegar." What?
What?
I'll throw you out of a window myself. Do you have some background for us, Mackelly?
I did pull together some background.
How could you miss? What a target this was.
I know. Well, this time I chose to focus on the first part of the chapter, the Northern Mountain Clans. So there are roughly 40 mountain clans in the northwest part of the north, all of varying sizes. The most prominent of the bunch being the ones that Bran mentioned in the chapter. These northern mountain clans are very different from the clans of the Mountains of the Moon. Unlike what might be considered the savages of the Mountains of the Moon clans, the northern mountain clans are more like petty lords. Bran explains a little bit. Even when their leaders are in Winterfell, they call them lords, but the actual members of the clans do not call their leaders lords. And like many in the north, the mountain clans have the first men origin. In fact, they've inhabited the mountains north of the Wolfswoods for thousands of years. Although eventually they were included in the domain of the Stark Kings of Winter. Now, the clans are a quarrelsome bunch, frequently fighting amongst themselves, often to the point where the Starks had to settle the disputes by force or by calling the clan chiefs to Winterfell for an intervention. And Tom Sevenstrings would be proud to know that the feuds that these mountain clans have been recorded in songs such as Black Pines and Wolves in the Hills. The clans often have run-ins with wildlings from north of the Wall, as well as Ironborn.
Okay. Comparison with the television show, just a reminder that Osha and Rickon are part of this party in the show.
Oh, right.
Yeah. But the key part of this, of course, is the story, and I don't believe Meera told this story. In the extras of the Blu-rays of Season 6, there is an animated short where she does give a rendition of the story.
Oh, that's neat.
Yeah, it was not done in the TV show.
I like that.
Pedantry Corner. This one's an obvious one, I think. If you are... they got lost several times, and they navigated by starlight. It seems a little bit obtuse to me to navigate by starlight. You are travelling by day.
So each night you take account of how you did during the day.
Exactly. and there is, during the day, there's one very big star in the sky, and you know roughly where it is. Even on a cloudy day, you know roughly where it is, and you head away from it, and you'll be heading north. But it's waiting for a perfectly clear night to figure out north seems just redundant. I don't know. It just seemed a bit weird.
Yeah, I get your point. Certainly get your point.
On the other part of that is, so he learned that the dragon, the blue eye of the ice dragon, is true north from Osha.
I see in your notes where you're going with this.
Maester Lewin, what Were you teaching this child? Surely the kid should know how to navigate himself around, you know? Maybe Lewin said, the sun rises in the east, goes south, sets in the west. That's all you need, kid.
That could have been... He took the shortcut there. Maybe he figured Bran, at his age, wouldn't need to do night navigation.
True. But hey, winter's coming, you know.
That is true.
All right, news and notes.
So George Martin has finally returned home after a 3-week-long trip to New York, New Jersey, and Chicago. He worded his trip as having joy, sadness, tragedy, love, and a lot of work. So, sounds like quite the trip. He'll fill us in on the highs and lows of it all over time. Although he did mention that he got to see his sister and her family while in New Jersey, so that's nice. But the primary reason for the trip was to promote the Rise of the Dragon book that he and Ilio and Linda have put out. But he did mention not bringing his laptop and returning home to 2,000 emails. But what that also means is that for the past 3 weeks, he's made no progress on the Winds of Winter. You could read into that as well if he did not, unless he was writing on napkins and.
I'm hoping at this point it's beyond that stage. But this came up on the Discord server this week. All of our episodes are sponsored by Audible. If you're looking for a way to entertain yourself during the holidays and need a quick break from listening to us, there's a link in the show notes. If you sign up, you'll get a free audiobook with any Audible trial. And if you're an Amazon Prime member, you get 2 free audiobooks.
Yeah, it's win-win.
Please avail yourself.
Yeah. And don't forget, please go out and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're trying to get subscribers and, of course, watch some of our episodes on YouTube. We provide that for you.
And we got a nice review from Colin Snowstorm at Apple Podcasts in the UK.
That's not a joke. That is literally the subject line of the.
The subject line is not a family member. I found you guys when I was recently renovating a bathroom, and then there's a toilet emoji, which is funny, and I've been hooked ever since. I'm about 20 episodes in, so lots more to keep me busy in 2023. Thank you, Colin. Welcome.
Yes.
Thanks for sending us a note. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, let's conclude. So, the progress north is continuing. It is tough going. I did wonder if Bran tried to reach out to an eagle, and they think they're going to see more eagles because they're getting into the territory of the eagles.
Right.
If he will be successful in trying to warg with them, and that would give him a sort of greater range of vision, maybe see over the wall before getting there.
Oh, true. Yeah. We have seen an eagle warg.
Right.
Orin.
I don't know if warging is generally a sort of like a one-on-one connection, or if you can just sort of randomly, I see an animal and I warg with it and become that animal for a few minutes.
It's not clear in the story yet, but we have met Varamir Sixskins with Jon, and he controls 3 wolves, a snow bear, a shadow cat. He's got all, but maybe it takes time. Maybe you can't just pick any animal you see. It takes time to develop a warging relationship with a particular animal. That's yet to be determined in our point of the story.
The Little was a very good friend to these guys and clearly a Stark loyalist. But, the journey is still tough. But if Meera has any more of these succinct History of the Seven Kingdoms stories in her repertoire, the journey might not be so boring. Well, for us at least. I think for Bran and company, I think it's going to be a real drag still.
Yes. And we got info that fuels the Ned and Ashara fire.
Yeah, just a little bit, but enough to sort of like say, well, that's definitely a possibility now.
Right.
And then perhaps doubts cast over Robert's version of the Lyanna Rhaegar kidnapping.
Yes, definitely brings some new light. Still could be the way he drew it up.
Absolutely. Just because I cried at your song doesn't mean I want to be dragged off to Dawn and raped repeatedly.
Right. So, but it just brings a new perspective, brings some new information that we can throw into the mix here.
Yeah. It's great storytelling, though. The whole thing, hell of a chapter.
It absolutely is. It was a lot of fun. Very unique chapter. I really enjoyed the way it was done. And we're off to a Davos chapter next week. I'll just say simply, he is in a pickle.
Okay. There are 3 ways that you could help us. You could go out and leave us a positive review. There's no better way to spread the word. You could buy merchandise at ghostsofharrenhal.threadless.com, or you can buy us a cup of Arbor Gold at buymeacoffee.com/ghostsharrenhal. Become a sustainer at the Lord Paramount or Knights of the Realm level and reap the benefits.
That's right. And as always, you can reach us at ghost.harrenhal@gmail.com, and you can follow us on Twitter at ghostharrenhal for as long as Twitter is around. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Discord, and YouTube.
That's just madness. It's madness. You've just spent $44 billion, and now you're just tanking the thing.
I haven't really been paying a great deal of attention, but I have heard tale that people thought it was going to collapse a few days ago.
I think it still might. I mean, it's really crazy. Do carry on.
Well, you can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram. Go out and join us on Discord, and go out and subscribe and watch us on YouTube.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.